Okay. I'm really interested in this one. Professor Gilday, what does the following phrase mean? La France profonde. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Okay, La France profonde. It means deep France. It means provincial France. It means, I mean, France is a very centralized country. It's centralized on Paris. Um, and, political life, cultural life, um, for a long time, and obviously even today, is very centered on Paris. So La France profonde is deep provincial France. And in fact, my first book, which was called Education in Provincial France in the 19th century, was an attempt to test that. So, to what extent, for example, if the government brought in education reforms, to what extent could they be implemented in somewhere like Brittany in the west, or Languedoc in the south, or the industrial north. So it's those areas which are very often conservative, but not always. They are kind of more slow moving. They're less industrialized. They're less urbanized. But I mean, I think you'd now have to make a kind of a number of corrections. So, for example, there are big regional capitals in France. I mean, I think I mentioned a few of them: Lille, Lyon, Marseille, Toulouse, Bordeaux. These are big regional centers.
Mm-hmm.
And very often in France, you have a mayor of one of these cities who is also a minister. You're allowed to be a mayor of a large city and a minister.
A minister in the federal government?
Yeah, I think they may have changed the rules recently, but for a long
Okay.
time this was the case. I think they've changed
And
the
I'm sorry, I
rules.
said federal government. What I meant to say is national
Yeah, the
government.
central
Okay.
government. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
central
I
government.
think
Yeah.
I think they have changed the rules slightly.
Okay.
Um, so there are big regional centers, which kind of, I won't say challenge Paris, but certainly provide an alternative center. And then the interesting thing, I mean, we talked about the gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets, because this is a movement of La France profonde, which has been called peripheral France. So this is the France that's been left behind, that's struggling economically.
Is this the marginalized France that you were talking about in the previous
Yeah,
segment?
as I was talking about before. So these people
Yeah.
who come up to Paris used to come up to Paris on a Saturday and demonstrate on the Champs-Élysées. So
So this really becomes political.
yeah. So what I think I'm saying is that La France profonde, is not inert, and it's not conservative. It's not uniformly conservative. It can get quite angry. I mean, quite a lot of left-wing movements in French history have come from the south. I mean, La France profonde is quite a reassuring term, and you think of French provincial cooking, and you think of holidays in Provence or Burgundy, or Brittany. Yeah. But that's a slightly kind of rosy, that's a kind of slightly rosy, rose-colored, rose-tinted spectacles view, because I think a lot of this provincial France is, as I said, quite unhappy and left behind and angry.
What is it? Well, let me ask you this way. Is there provincial resentment towards what is perceived as Parisian elitism?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always been resentment of Paris because it's so dominant, as I say, politically, culturally. I mean, people used to say if you wanted to be a writer or an artist, you had to go up to Paris. I mean, there was nothing else. And ditto, the Parisians, look down on people from the provinces. They think they're kind of peasants or uncultivated, or So I
Wow.
think there is quite a lot of resentment, and unlike in the United States, where you've obviously got multiple centers of politics and culture, and even in Britain, we have Edinburgh, we have Dublin, we have Manchester, we have, and these are sizable capitals. But I think the problem with France is that it is very centralized, both politically and culturally.
Last night when I was
Maybe less so than it used to be, but still.
last night when I was preparing for our conversation, it sort of occurred to me that I can't think of another country's capital that compares to Paris in its sheer importance. Most of the countries have several cities that really sort of spread out culture, industry. Um, does anything come to mind for you? I mean, you already compared to the United States and the United Kingdom. Maybe Tehran in Iran, which is oversized. Not Moscow because you got St. Petersburg. Berlin, you have several other cities. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just couldn't think of any.
No, I think it is exceptional, and I think, I mean, until before the French Revolution, the king had his kind of chateau, his palace in Versailles, which is about 12 miles outside Paris, and the king actually left Paris in the kind of in the 17th century because Paris was too unruly, so he decided to move outside and build his chateau somewhere else. And then when the French Revolution happened, it was the women of Paris who marched to Versailles and demanded the king and queen come back to Paris.
Oh, women of Paris. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
And once that happened, it meant that the government and the people were in the same place, and that made it vulnerable. And that's one of the, in a sense, that's kind of one reason why these revolutions often succeed, is because the center of the popular movement and the center of government is in the same place, and it doesn't take that much to kind of invade government buildings or parliament and try and take power.
Yeah, centers of power. If you wanted our audience to remember just one point after everything we've talked about, just one point about the French revolutionary spirit, what would it be?
Well, I thought a bit about this, and I don't know whether you saw clips of this, but when the government tried to force through this pension reform by emergency decree, the opposition politicians stood up and started singing the Marseillaise, which is the French national anthem, but it's a very interesting national anthem which goes back to the French Revolution.
Oh wow! Okay.
And if I can just read you I've translated a couple of lines from it just to give you a flavor of it, because it's quite aggressive.
Are you going to read it, or are you going to sing it?
No, I'm not going to. No, I've got a terrible voice. It says, so in translation, "Forward, children of the fatherland! The day of glory has arrived. The bloody standard of tyranny has been waved against us. To arms, citizens! Draw up your battalions, so that the impure blood will soak our furrows." So those are
pretty powerful words for the members of the current parliament to actually sing, right?
Yeah, but it's the French national anthem. I mean, if you and it's sung on all occasions. But there was a time in the 1970s when the president tried to kind of change the tune to make it a bit more kind of hymn-like and a bit more, unaggressive. But it was drawn up at a time when the French Revolution had just happened. Other powers, Prussia and Austria, were invading or about to invade. The British were, trying to snuff out the French Revolution. There were counter-revolutionary parts in La France profonde, which were opposed to revolution. So this is an anthem which is militaristic, which is aggressive, which is about the formation of a citizen army to destroy the enemies of the Republic or the enemies of the revolution. and it's sung on every occasion. And I just think it carries a very powerful message of patriotism, revolution, and also pride.
Yeah, I can see how the revolutionary spirit is sort of sown in their culture. It's in their national anthem.
Well, it's hardwired in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Professor Gilday, thank you so much for educating me and our listeners. And to our listeners, if you know of any history that could provide more perspective from the past on this subject, please share it with us.